Men of Reddit, what are the struggles of dating a very rich girl? This is probably gonna get buried, but I've always wanted to write it out. I was never sure how rich she was. I just knew her family had property in a couple places in the US and China. And this is also how I found out property in China is dumb expensive. When she went for the holidays, if she wanted to say, stay in Shanghai and then go to Beijing later, she didn't have to look at hotels or Airbnb. She just had to make sure she grabbed the right set of keys. It was weird. She wasn't dripping with designer clothes and drove a fuel-efficient compact, but just looking at where her family had apartment houses, I can only imagine. She was a super sweet, down-to-earth girl, biggest heart in the world, very hard-working, and acted like a child in a candy shop everywhere she went. I think the biggest strain came when we would eat together. For me, money was tight, and the best way to stretch my college scholarship money was to cook meals in bulk. Before she met me, she ate out literally every single meal. At first, it took some adjusting and rebudgeting. Bless her heart, she understood and found compromises. She loved my cooking and would surprise me with groceries and then say I have to pay her back by cooking whatever she wanted. Every once a while she'd pick up the entirety of a bill that we were supposed to split, but she always found a way to make sure I didn't feel down about it. I don't think she ever once bought me an expensive gift. Most things were either handmade or were very thoughtful. For example, shoes I'd been eyeing for months but couldn't afford, and she noticed them in my computer browser. I miss that girl. I hope she's doing well. I dated a pretty rich girl. Her dad was a prominent lawyer, her mom a successful artist, and her uncle was a 1980s pop star. Honestly, they were great people to be around. They were old money and not snotty or overly pretentious. Yes, they had a big but old house and drove quality, not overly flashy, cars. Yes, they had whatever they wanted, but not at all in a look at me type way. I, on the other hand, was dirt poor. I mean, in the early 90s grunge was a blessing for me because I looked like that already. But her parents didn't care and we're always very welcoming. Her mom even took me to my first punk show. I guess it's true when they say cash screams and wealth whispers. Well said. My girlfriend, now wife, wasn't rich herself, but had very rich parents, both lawyers, one in family law, the other in corporate counsel, but they were pretty normal during her upbringing. The law careers and massive salaries came when she was a teenager. The toughest thing was that her parents would offer to pay for nearly anything, but later try to use that as leverage to control her when they didn't like what she was doing. She was college aged, so it happens a bit. Parents and teenagers aren't perfect. Things like stop paying for her car suddenly, or reneging on a trip that they offered to pay for and she booked, and was suddenly on the hook for the cost. It was certainly toxic from their end, and she kept falling for it each time. However, in her 20s, once she was out of college and employed, she didn't need their money, so anything that was offered with strings attached, or had the potential to do that, she could just decline. They learned pretty quickly that manipulation via finances isn't a good way to foster a relationship with your daughter in her 20s. Her mom figured it out, her dad not so much. For unrelated reasons they got divorced, and her relationship is still very strained with her dad. I dated a senator's daughter in high school. Everything was about keeping up appearances and we had to be careful where we went in public and stuff like that. Her parents offered to get me nicer clothes to wear when we went to dinner in public, but I felt weird about it. Relationship didn't last long. I'm not good at being political. I feel that this is a little different than the other stories though. A senator's daughter is very much a public figure, and you have to deal with tabloids, media, public opinion, and high chance of recognition on a scale most of the stories here don't have. I dated a girl from a wealthy family when I was in college and I was very poor. The most frustrating thing for me was that our definition of a crisis was so different. From month to month I would literally not know whether I could afford my rent or be able to put gas in my car, and she would be freaking out about some, to me, minor social issue, or whether a store carried a fashion brand she liked. It definitely made things difficult, and I had to remember that it's your perspective that dictates what is a crisis and what isn't. It was honestly a lesson I've tried to remember over the years. If you're coming from a very poor family, as was my case, expect a lot of butting of heads when it comes to financial issues. I was raised very poor. Now I make a decent amount of money, but if I'm ever in a situation where I have a lot of expenses and may run into financial issues, I tend to panic a little bit and plan my spending extremely carefully. My wife came from a wealthy family and she never had to deal with financial struggles at any point in her life. And she doesn't quite care about spending a lot of money. Basically, she doesn't think past the fact that we can afford something. She doesn't think about possibly needing money in the future, and that's where we always butt heads. In short, make sure you ask her to let you know before she spends more than X amount. That was the solution we came up with, and it has actually saved us from a lot of financial trouble. Spending should be a thing you both agree on, otherwise it's not going to work out. I'm in the opposite situation. I grew up with less money than my GF, but it mostly gave me a fricket. Money never lasts long, might as well buy stuff that gives me some happiness attitude, and she knows how to budget and save money. I married one. Nothing to do with my wife at all. She's a gem. It's my Mills expectations and image are always the center of just about every single decision. Phil, the real rich person, is cool as heck, though. That's pretty much my experience. My Mill can be really terrible to deal with. My Phil is usually pretty cool. I dated a girl in college that came from a very wealthy family. Texas oil money. Like, she flew from Dallas to Florida, where we went to school, in her daddy's business jet. That kinda rich. I think the biggest thing for me was how out of touch she was with everyday money issues. For example, someone smashed into my car in the parking lot and I was totally upset about it. She was like, "It's okay, you can just get a new one." She had no concept of how insurance or deductibles work, and she didn't understand that I could not simply go out and get it fixed right away. Another example was that she wanted me to go to Miami to see a U2 concert with her. She had like front row tickets. I couldn't go because I had to work. She didn't understand that my boss would not give a crap about how cool it would be to see U2. This was before they sucked. She was always doing something. Constantly going on trips, or to the openings of expensive restaurants, or traveling to her parents' vacation house, or getting tickets for some opening night or something. It was frankly exhausting. She had money and she wanted to spend it, and I just couldn't keep up. I say had because it was entirely her parents' money. She was in grad school, though she was struggling at it, and otherwise had absolutely no work or experience. Outside of a restaurant, she barely had any life experience either. This was my experience too. Exhausting is a good way to put it. Admitting financial struggles. When my wife and I were dating in university, her family invited me up to their cottage during the break between Christmas and New Year's to ski, skate and otherwise play in the snow. I wanted to go, but I didn't know how to ski, and had no outdoor clothing appropriate to be out in the snow. No ski jacket, pants or boots. I declined the invitation, but my then girlfriend was really sad and asked why. I had to admit I didn't have the gear needed and I couldn't afford them. She then passed it on to her family, and when I visited them on Christmas Day, they led me to a room with 3 types of everything new with tags laid out on a bed for me to choose from. It was a wonderful gesture, but I had mixed feelings. I appreciated the gear very much, but I felt like a charity case. Also, managing expectations of my wife for travel and expectations with children's activities. She was used to jetting away whenever they felt like it and had her own horses growing up. That's just not an option for us. We do okay and we're happy, but horses are not financially viable. I lived in a pretty rich area of the Bay Area. My GF at the time was very rich for this already wealthy area, but she truly had no concept of money. Her budget was $12,000 a month. Her family bought her a brand new Porsche because her car was 5-year-old BMW M5. It was honestly like dating an alien. Any issues I had in everyday life were just so far out of her life experience. $144K that just magically appears in her bank account. I mean, that's pretty good money for a working stiff, but it's crazy good money for someone who, like, rolled over on the first of the month. Let me tell a story that I think will provide a nice contrast to the majority of the comments here. This story isn't mine, but that of a close friend's brother. So Joe went away to college and met Sarah there halfway through freshman year. They were on again off again for a few months before deciding to date seriously in junior year. They met each other's families on vacation or when they would come to visit their kids at school. By all accounts, Sarah's family was polite and nice and relatively laid back, not a whiff of arrogance or anything like that. Fast forward to the end of senior year. Joe's paternal grandfather is on his deathbed and Joe desperately wants to go say goodbye. However, they go to school in a small town with a private airport, think Cessnas, and the closest major airport is several hours away by car, and neither of them have a car. Said airport also didn't have a direct flight, so it would have been pushing 24 hours until he got to the hospice center to see his grandfather. This was destroying Joe, as he and grandpa were very close and he was essentially a second father to him. Without a word, Sarah pulled Joe into a cab and took him to the airport. Waiting for them was Sarah's family's private plane. Joe, and my friend and her family, were all astounded. They had no idea Sarah's family was wealthy, and especially not private plane wealthy. Anyways, off Joe went and he said goodbye and he flew coach back to school. Sarah never said a word about it one way or the other and neither did Joe. They are now married and both doing well in their careers, and from what I can tell live a very normal life. But every once in a while they disappear off to some remote island or jungle or mountain for a few days a year and don't tell anyone but their family where they're going. Nice story with a happy ending. I was an aspiring lawyer and she an aspiring artist. She came from a rich family and I grew up in a bad socio-economic area. My parents were refugees back in the 70s. Basically never knew how rich she was until I went to her hometown for her brother's wedding. Apart from the amazing apartment her parents had, they had an empty apartment in the downtown area for guests that I could sleep in. Easily the fanciest place I've stayed at. Oh, and her older brother that was in the family business had to go to all the factories they owned to do something. Relationship started to take a hit when her dad blamed me for his daughter's dreams of being an artist. I only made her believe in herself and to choose her destiny herself instead of letting her parents force her into the family business. She changed her major from business management to art without me knowing and her parents freaked out and blamed me for it. I couldn't really handle the drama in law school so we ended things. Last time I checked her out she was in an art school somewhere in Europe. Seems like she's still living the dream. Good for you, mate. Ultimately, people have to try and live the life they want for themselves. I think you showed how she could. I'm glad she still is. Nothing. There was literally nothing wrong with dating a rich girl when I was poor back in college. I had a good major, was an athlete, and her family loved me. I didn't have money to give her flashy gifts, and she didn't care. If she wanted a Birkin, she'd just shop with her mom. I didn't have money to take her on fancy vacations or trips. We'd just go skiing at her parents' condo and I could always find a way to scrape up some money to get myself there and everything else would be taken care of. They didn't care that I wasn't an appropriate suitor at the time. I was just a college kid and must have done a nice enough job of presenting myself that they knew I'd figure it out. It was an awesome relationship. One of the least stressful relationships imaginable. We eventually fell out of love for other reasons, but I look back on that time fondly and we ended things amicably. Still on good terms with the family too. She had no self-realization of our financial differences and how that means experiences in our lives are drastically different. She lives in Texas and would fly to NYC for the weekend, go to Hawaii, California or Florida on a whim. When she asked me what I wanted I was always really mega because that's how I live. I don't need the most expensive item but for her, that was all or nothing. Eventually she learned to respect and almost envy my way of living. She enjoyed my simple life. But then it turned out she was a total sociopath so she may not be the best example of dating a rich girl either. When people weren't gifting her things she would just use her daddy's black credit card to get it. She was a very selfish woman. That took a while to mayo. I guess I had a different type than everyone else. We worked together and you wouldn't know she was rich unless you really got to know her. She worked as a diversion, something to do and meet new people. She never looked at the price of anything. Had a $5,000 watch, Dolce & Gabbana glasses she would break at least once a month cause she's clumsy. Very humble, very sweet and probably the hardest worker there. We were managers. The issue was that there was absolutely nothing we could do together that was new to her. She had more money and free time. Her bucket list was completed by 22. There was nothing new or fresh within my, I don't know the word, realm, ability. We got along great and I found out from a mutual friend she was excited to be with someone not using her or groveling cause she was frick you levels of rich. It was my pride I think that ruined it. Nothing she did. I had issues letting her pay for everything and I was unable to show her anything she hadn't seen. I stopped being fun because I couldn't wow or impress her and it got in my head. She was perfectly happy doing normal things. But it wasn't enough for me. I had to impress her. We lost contact years ago. I hope she's doing well. She was freaking awesome and deserves to be happy. Gift giving during holidays, birthdays. Being given a $600 camera while I give you a $50 purse or equivalent gift sucks a lot. It's the thought that counts. My friend got me a gift for Christmas worth significantly less than what I paid for her gifts, but she put thought into every one she picked and it shows. Meeting the people she knows. It's hard to talk about my average self when my audience is a collection of some of the most gifted, driven, accomplished people I've come across. For instance, the first friend she introduced me to, one had temporarily quit healthcare, traveled the world making a documentary and then spent 6 months delivering healthcare in some third world country, returning a few weeks before we met, and the other had entered into sports journalism and is very quickly climbing the ladder to one of the most reputable newspapers of the nation. After hearing them share these interesting stories about each other, it came to me. I'm sat there, trying my best to make. I fixed up a rental property, then spent 4 hours a night studying every day of the past couple months. Sound interesting? This happens almost every time. Theoretical physicists, accomplished sportsmen, artists, and a lot of medical students, professionals. Then me, a glorified white van man with aspirations on something I should have studied 7 years earlier, instead of going straight into the workforce with a forklift license. Constantly balancing their lifestyle expectations with your salary. I went through it as a 23-year-old making $42K in Manhattan. A carefree weekend without pro-gaming can blow your entire monthly discretionary income. Girl or boy, their most realistic fear is that anyone who shows interest in them is doing so only because of their money. That's why the more well-off someone is, the more low-key they are about it. Those who aren't low-key get devoured by human sharks very quickly. I dated this girl while in college. She never mentioned anything. She lived a simple life until I went to her family's place for Thanksgiving. Right off the bat, her mom did not like me. I respect everyone, but if you try me, I go hard. Her mom told me that she would feel more comfortable if she had my social security to do a check on me, to make sure I am not a felon or something. I asked her for her social security to make sure her money was legit and that if me and her daughter had kids, they wouldn't end up having grandparents in jail. We are not together now. Well played. Not the man but the rich girl. I hope you guys are interested in my story. I come from a family who built their way in the world and got very wealthy. Growing up, my parents had me and my sister working regular jobs so we would learn the value of money. It worked. Back then, I was not allowed to date anyone until I was 18. Not that I ever cared because I was a nerd and preferred my video games to real people. When I got older and nature decided to kick in, I was starting college and I met a guy. He was very handsome and did not seem to care who my family was. I was pleased because most people would fake to be my friends because of my background. That lasted until I met his parents. He was from a lower middle class family and his parents were all about the what are the neighbors going to think mindset. They are so excited about me that they started being so weird, buying a Mercedes that they could not afford, buy nice clothes, expensive wines. The guy just got terrible after a few years. We moved together in a very nice downtown condo and he went mad. He loaded his credit card to buy expensive watches, suits, shoes. My dad got him a job in a good company and I guess he thought he was a big shot now. I left him about 6 months later because he was trying to change me into a trophy wife. He was getting upset if I did not have makeup on or if I was gaming in my PJs all day night because you know, if someone would have knocked the door and I was dressed like that, what would they have thought? When I left, I was still paying for the condo he was living in. His parents were harassing me about their son's future and trying to manipulate me into going back. I am not that stupid. I tried to get him to buy me out of the condo. He did not want it to. We got into a massive legal fight. It was terrible. I have other stories if you are interested. Sorry for the English. Not my first language. To be fair, you still aren't wrong. Video games are better than most people, lol. My wife didn't tell me about any of the money stuff until right before we got married. I knew that her family was pretty well off because I had traveled with them a few times, but I honestly had no clue what it was all like. Like someone else said, crisis has a completely different meaning. We only live off of what we make now. Any money in any other accounts are for very specific purposes. Down payment for a house, car savings. I feel very fortunate that I married into a family that knows the right way to handle money and doesn't act rich. Man, I'm just always afraid that she gets the wrong idea. That I am with her for what she has, not for who she is. That her parents can't accept me unless if I learn the same as her. I almost never accept gifts from her, which kinda sucks cause it makes her sad sometimes. Overall, it's great if you love her. You should accept the gifts. Some people just want to share what they have with the people they love, and it is alienating when that affection is turned away. I once dated a girl who lived in Beverly Glen, near Bel Air. I lived in Canoga Park at the time, down in the valley. She would come down the hill and I'd take the bus to meet her in Sherman Oaks. Biggest struggle was getting some alone time at her house, what with her house manager, parents assistant, and caretaker around at all times. This was when I was 17. It lasted for almost a year. She had to go to college, Syracuse if I recall correctly. As much as I appreciate this as a fellow Valley boy, no one knows what you're talking about with those neighborhood references, lol. She thought her parents' money was her money. Her parents would even remind her that it wasn't. She literally got everything she wanted though. One of the craziest things she asked for and received was a professional full format Epson printer. The thing was the size of a Mini Cooper and made absolutely stunning prints. She also expected everything to be paid for her. She also didn't have to work, had school paid in full. We both went to Art Center in Pasadena. Very expensive. Her parents paid for it in full, so she had no debt. I'm still paying for it, and she had the nerve to tell me I wasn't doing enough while I was going to school and working full time. My buddy married a super rich girl from China. He grew up in the suburbs and came from an economically poor family. He went from rags to riches, literally started from nothing. I remember growing up as kids, he'd eat mayonnaise sandwiches at school. He changed quite a bit. He went from having nothing that was branded to suddenly having everything, including a brand new Porsche. He was outfitted with super expensive clothes, lost a bunch of weight and turned out pretty good for himself. Anyway, he later discovered that his in-laws were just using him for immigration business purposes since he's a citizen here, and he ended up divorcing his wife, having no kids. Half of nothing is, well, nothing. He got a divorce with the clothes on his back and his car that he was given. Since the divorce he got a high-paying corporate job making six figures, still has all his luxury goods, and is currently dating someone who looks like a supermodel. Oh yeah, and he still has his Porsche SUV. Holy freaking crap, why can't this happen to me? If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.